Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Signals We Send, Rethinking Leadership in an Age of Noise. I'm Greg Barry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. As is the case with any virtual setting, please excuse issues that may pop up. If you experience video or audio problems, click Reconnect or refresh your screen to get back to the presentation right away. Before I introduce today's guest, a quick question. What do you believe is the most critical trait of a modern leader? Your choices are charisma, integrity, strategic thinking, communication skills, or empathy. And it may be other. If it is other, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'm very curious what Parker would say about this. And just please select the best answer for you. We're going to go ahead and leave that poll up so you can make your selection. A note for today's live attendees, we are recording the webinar. Once it's been uploaded onto our website, we'll send an email with it with the replay link. So today I'm excited to welcome Dr. Parker Woodroof back as a guest. Dr. Woodroof is an associate professor of marketing in Clark School of Business. His research specializes in digital marketing, cause-related marketing, and the marketing finance interface. He was with us this past March for The Science of Social Media and AI, Unlocking Its Power, Confronting Its Challenges, and Reclaiming Our Future. You can look back at it by visiting our library of webinars at alumni.uab.edu/videos. Wow, completely forgetting where I'm at. Before we continue, here are the results of that poll. I'm going to go ahead and click stop. 43% believe that the most critical trait of a modern leader is communication skills. 31% is integrity, and then it drops off to strategic thinking. Immigrace, go ahead and toss up that next one. I just want to do a follow-up poll. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing emerging leaders today? Is it a lack of role models, pressure to reform, disconnection from purpose, overexposure to conflicting messages, or limited opportunities for growth? I'm going to go ahead and keep that up, Parker, for a bit as we'll drop those in the chat when we get the results. But we want to get to you and hear what you have to say about rethinking the leadership in this age of noise. Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Greg. This is a real pleasure. I'm glad for the opportunity. And I just wanted to, thank everybody who's here. Really, I know how much is on our plates, and I'm just grateful that you chose to show up today. This conversation matters a lot to me personally, and I think it matters a lot to most of you as well, because what we're talking about, leadership and the kind of culture it creates, that's not abstract. It's shaping the lives, the futures, the mental health of the people we lead, and it's time we got really honest about what it's doing to us. All right. So this talk actually started to take shape for me after something that happened early in my PhD program. I was a first year. It was actually as soon as the first year completed, actually, I had managed barely to scrape by with B minuses in both classes taught by the most prolific, most respected professor in our business school. And just for context, a C in a PhD course is basically a death sentence. If you get a C, you're out. So I wasn't failing, but I was just holding on. But it was the hardest year of my life that I was going through. The first year of my PhD program was the hardest year of my life. I was in the middle of a trauma that I didn't even have words for yet. I was isolated, overwhelmed, and trying to just keep it together in a system that wasn't really designed to ask, how are you doing? Just whether or not you're producing. And then one day I opened my mailbox and found a handwritten letter, a short note from that same prolific professor that I had earned B minuses in his 2 seminar classes. There was no greeting, no encouragement, no interest in who I was or what I might be carrying in my life. Just a real quiet judgment. He said I wasn't cut from the same cloth as the rest of them. It appeared that I was distracted. And at the end, he said, I think you should probably quit. There wasn't an attempt to understand, to be curious, to ask if I was okay. Just a reduction, a moment that summed me up by the worst version of my performance and decided that's all I was. And I'll be honest, I almost believed him, because when someone in a position of power looks at your pain and calls it weakness, it's hard not to internalize that, especially when you're already wondering if you belong. So that moment really stuck with me, not because it was the worst thing someone's ever said to me, but because of what it revealed. It pulled back the curtain on how leadership often works, how easily we collapse a person into a number, a grade, a moment of struggle, and how rarely we pause to understand what's really going on underneath. So that letter wasn't just about me. It was really a mirror held up to something a lot bigger. And it made me realize this isn't just one bad moment. I think this is the model. And I think it's time that we imagine a different one. So that letter didn't just bruise my ego. It opened my eyes, because once I stepped outside of the pain of it, I started to notice something else altogether, something more systemic. And I began seeing how leadership, as we've been taught and trained and promoted to practice it, is built around a certain kind of signal. And most of us have learned to send that signal without even realizing it. It's subconscious. We measure, we critique, we evaluate. We reward the ones who rise quickly, and we quietly let go of the ones who are struggling. We move fast and optimize. We coach for results, right? But rarely do we stop to ask what kind of world we're reinforcing with those behaviors, what kind of culture we're building under the surface of all that efficiency. And in my opinion, once you start noticing, it's hard to stop. And I started seeing it in classrooms, in meetings, in hallway conversations. I saw it in how performance got praised while presence got overlooked, in how being confident, even if you were bluffing, was rewarded more than being honest about what you didn't know. And how people avoided showing emotion because somewhere along the way, we were all told that real leaders don't do that, that real leaders always have the answers, and that they're always composed. But all of that, those signals weren't those signals that we're constantly sending. They're not neutral. They teach people what matters. They shape expectations, and they create entire environments where it becomes unsafe to be human. So you can feel it in the air sometimes, I think. That quiet pressure to hold it together, to stay sharp, to never fall behind. It's not always loud, but it's always there. And to me, it's just exhausting, especially for the people who are just starting out, students, new employees, the people trying to find their place in the world. They're looking around trying to figure out what leadership means. And most of what they see, well, it doesn't look like something that they want to become, I don't think. It looks like something that they have to survive. We don't always mean to send those messages, but we do, a lot of times inadvertently. And the scariest part is they work. People adapt to what they think they need to be in order to be accepted, promoted, respected, I'd say. And we wonder why so many people feel so lost, right? We wonder why burnout is on the rise, why people are just checking out, why the younger generations are so skeptical of traditional leadership. I think it's because the signals they're receiving don't align with what they actually need. What they need is safety. What they need is curiosity and inspiration from their leaders. And right now, by and large, I think we're giving them a leadership built around domination and control. And what they need is someone who doesn't look through them or past them, but sees them, like really sees them right where they are. But we've built a system that often trains the exact opposite. And if we want something better, if we want to create cultures where people can actually become who they're meant to be, then I think we have to start by getting really honest about what we're unintentionally broadcasting. Because culture, as we all know, that doesn't just happen, right? It's transmitted one signal at a time. So the more I paid attention, the more I saw how many people were quietly just carrying that same experience I had. different details, of course, different industries, different life stages, but the same feeling underneath. And I think some of you here today know that feeling. So people who had been overlooked when they needed someone to believe in them, people who had been told that they were too much or not enough, people who had started out full of energy and vision, and somewhere along the way just began to shrink. Not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped feeling safe. It's everywhere. It's in classrooms and offices, in boardrooms, in churches, in hospitals. We have to quietly construct cultures where the loudest voices aren't the ones that get the most space. Right now, those are the voices that tend to get the most airtime, the most broadcasting, are those loudest voices. Where the people who ask for help are seen as weak, where the ones who need development are the most too afraid to ask for it because they've learned that vulnerability comes with consequences. And when that becomes the norm, you get what we're seeing right now, I think. You get students who feel aimless and disconnected and without meaning and purpose. You get employees who feel replaceable and unseen. And you get leaders who feel like they can't be honest even with themselves. And to me, the ache of all of that disconnection, it builds. It seeps into people's sense of worth. It starts to sound like, maybe I'm the problem, or worse, maybe this is just how it is. But it's not, and it doesn't have to be. And I can tell you how many people I've talked to, students, staff, executives, directors, who have told me some version of the same thing. I'm trying to lead differently. I just don't know what that looks like anymore, because they were never shown. They were never given that example. They were measured, certainly not mentored. They were corrected, not cultivated. And they were told to be efficient before they were ever invited to be whole. And the heartbreak of it all, that the part that's, that most of the people doing the measuring and correcting, they're not trying to harm anyone. They're just passing down what was done to them. It's like this never-ending subconscious hazing. What they were told leadership was supposed to look like, right? So we keep repeating the pattern. And the next generation keeps receiving the same message: perform, impress, and don't fall apart. But in my opinion, here's the thing I've learned the hard way. People don't grow when they're afraid. They grow when they feel safe, when they feel like someone believes in them. When they have someone who says, not what's wrong with you, but what do you need right now? And that shift, that move from judgment to curiosity, from critique to care, that's not just kindness. I think that's leadership. And some of you brought this up with the communication skills. 40-something% of you understand that. It's what opens up space for people to show up fully and with dreams and ambition and inspiration. It's what allows dreams to take shape again after they've been buried by fear for so many years. It's what makes someone maybe whisper, maybe I'm not too much. Maybe I'm not in the right environment yet. And that kind of signal, when someone sends it with consistency and sincerity, it has the power to change everything. And the best part, I think, is that we all have access to it. So once I started seeing all the ways leadership has been going sideways, in my opinion, how it was wounding people and shrinking them, making them feel invisible, I couldn't stop asking myself what it would look like just to do it differently, not just slightly better, not just with nicer language or more training modules, but completely reimagine. What if leadership wasn't about control or charisma, but maybe about what you transmit, what you ultimately are signaling? What if the core of leadership is actually about the signals you send, the energy you bring into a room, the way that you make people feel when they leave a conversation with you? That's what I've come to believe in, that leadership is a signal, period. And every day, every interaction, we are transmitting something. We're signaling whether it's safe to show up honestly. We're signaling ultimately what matters, what gets praised, what gets ignored, what gets shut down. We're signaling whether people are allowed to dream or if they think to shrink themselves to fit in. And if we want a new kind of leadership, one that actually heals instead of harms, I think it starts with sending different signals altogether. Signals that develop people instead of managing them. Signals that invite people forward instead of keeping them in line. And there are three signals that I come back to again and again, three shifts that I think can transform how we lead. And the first is curiosity instead of control. So the old model of leadership says, I need to fix you. I need to steer this ship. But curiosity says, I want to understand who you are and what you're carrying. So it's slower, it's messier, but it changes everything because people aren't problems to be solved. They're stories that are unfolding. And when you lead with curiosity, people start to feel like their story matters again. So the second is presence over performance. And we've been trained to think leaders always need to have it together, right? So to always be composed, always be certain, always be just a few steps ahead, right? But the truth is, people don't trust perfection. They trust presence. They trust the leader who stays when things get hard, the leader who listens when someone's unraveling, the leader who knows that showing up real does more good than showing up polished. And presence says, I'm here. Not to fix you, just to be with you. I think that's leadership. That's where we're having to go now. And the third is vision instead of validation. So it's tempting to build leadership around approval, right? Around being liked, being followed, being impressive. But real leadership, I don't think is about seeking validation. I think it's about casting vision. I think it's about helping people imagine a future that's better than what they've known and walking with them as they start to believe they belong in it. So it's about saying, I see something in you that maybe you can't see yet, and I'm going to hold that vision steady until you can. Those are the signals that change people, not because they're flashy or loud, but because they're rare, because they cut through the noise. They tell the truth about what actually makes someone feel alive again. And the truth is, anyone can lead like that. You don't need a title or to be in charge. You just need to be someone who's willing to send a different kind of signal into the world. Now, what's powerful about all of this is that it doesn't require a revolution. It doesn't require a complete organizational overhaul or a new system or some sort of 10-point plan. Okay. It just requires us to become a different kind of presence, to realize that the way we move through the world is already forming someone somewhere, that the tone of our voice in a meeting, the way we respond to failure, the look on our face when someone shares something vulnerable, those are all signals, and they matter more than we think they do, right? We're not just sending messages with what we say. We're shaping culture with how we live. And I know that might sound a little idealistic, but with all of my heart, I really believe that every single person here right now has the power to shift the atmosphere they're a part of. Not by being louder, like I've said, but by being the most open and present person in the room, to do no harm, right? It's not about being the smartest person in the room. We have to be intentional about, what make other people feel like you're there, you're present, and you're willing to listen. People remember how you made them feel. That's what sticks. That's what becomes part of their internal script. So maybe the real question isn't, am I a leader? Maybe it's, what kind of signal am I sending? Are people bracing when I walk in the room, or are they breathing easier? Do they leave conversations with me feeling smaller or more seen and valued? And so, like, this isn't a guilt trip here. It's really just about awareness, because once you become aware, you can choose differently, right? You can learn to pause before reacting. You can notice, who isn't speaking in the room and invite their voice forward. You can name someone's strength before they've even realized that they have it. You can become the kind of person people remember, not because you were so impressive, but because they felt safe around you, because they felt encouraged, because, maybe for a few minutes, they didn't have to perform with you. I think that's what leadership can be. And that's the kind of leadership that we're starving for in our society. So when I say become the signal, I'm not saying, put on a new identity or pretend to be something you're not. I'm saying just strip it all down. Get quiet enough to remember what kind of presence you want to be in the world, what kind of space you want to create, what kind of legacy you want to leave in the wake of your words. And then send that signal over and over again, even when it feels small, even when no one seems to notice. I'm telling you, they do. They feel it, and it changes people more than we'll ever know. And as I sit here right now, years removed from that letter that professor sent me, I think about how different things could have been, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been reduced to a single moment and told, that right there is who you are. Sometimes we reduce people down to their very worst moment without enough curiosity to see past that to what they're capable of. What would have happened if someone had paused long enough to see what I was carrying? If someone had maybe pulled me aside and said, hey, I know you're not okay, but I'm not giving up on you. I want to figure this out with you. If someone had believed in my potential more than they feared my pain. And I think a lot about that, because I know, how much just one signal can do, how one moment of curiosity or one voice of belief, one consistent presence in the middle of chaos can make someone feel like they can keep going. And I don't tell this story because I need empathy. I tell it because I know I'm not the only one. And I tell it because I don't want to keep passing down a model of leadership that leaves people alone when they need us the most. We're living in a time where people are desperate for a new kind of power. Students, employees, parents, neighbors. People aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for someone who feels safe, someone who can help them dream again. Maybe someone who doesn't just manage their behavior, but sees their becoming. And I genuinely believe with everything in me that this is possible at scale. We can change this, that, we're already building it quietly, one signal at a time. And it starts in how you respond to someone's worst day, and how you encourage someone who doubts themselves, maybe in how you hold the space when someone breaks down instead of speeding past it. And I think it starts in small rooms, in quiet moments, in one-on-one conversations that no one else sees. That's where culture shifts begin. That's where new stories are written. And that's how we create a model of leadership that doesn't just get results, but makes people feel whole. So, in my opinion, if you remember anything from these last few minutes, I do hope it's this. You are already sending signals, whether you know it or not, with your tone, with your timing, your presence, your pauses. And the people around you, they're listening, even when you don't think they are. So let's just send signals that restore instead of deplete, maybe that awaken instead of impress, that give people something to hold on to when the world feels too loud or too sharp or too fast. I just want us to be the type of leaders that we wished we'd had. So let's become the signal that tells someone that they belong, that they matter, and that they're not alone. Because that's not just how we change leadership. I think that's how we change everything. Thank you.
And if you do have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat for Parker. I just love your delivery, man. You're laid back, you kick it real. And I think that resonates with the audience and as a leader, to tie it in back to what this webinar is all about. If you do have questions, go ahead, please do drop them in the chat. We have time to answer those. So I'm curious, you walk into that boardroom, you have that person that has the title. Everybody's intimidated by them. Most people are intimidated by them. What can we do to kind of set the tone with them? What kind of conversations can we have with them to try to change their mindset?
I think that's such a great question. It's one of the questions, Greg, because I think one thing that maybe can help answer that is I don't think that we need the most powerful person in the building's permission to start acting like leaders should act. One of the things I do, for example, I know students come from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different experiences. And so when my students come in, they're always listening to some music that I got going on that day. And it's pretty hoppy. It's going. And I go around and fist bump and just ask people how their day was and just kind of have that moment with everybody. And it takes like 5 or 10 minutes of class. And you could argue that I'm taking valuable class time away to connect like that. I would say the opposite. I think that intentionally thinking about what do you want people that are listening to you to feel when they come into your room, when they're engaging in conversations with you. That was a little sidebar. Now, more intentionally, I think that you can get very strategic. In the School of Business, am just, starving to make sure that our leadership in the building is tip top and that we're known for it. And so I started with a few other people, a culture task force that went around the building on a listening tour, collecting qualitative and quantitative data from every stakeholder in the building, including our, tippy top leaders. And, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And it's just to take the initiative to go collect data. And then AI has kind of become my best friend where I can group that data in meaningful ways to present to leadership and other stakeholders. Like, this is kind of how we see each other right now. And if we want to move past that, here are some, steps forward. So I think, as bold as we can be, and I know that even in a professional setting, boldness, it's not truly rewarded always. If you have leadership that's maintaining status quo, you have to get really creative about that. You have to make your leadership realize that, you're trying to illuminate paths for connection between the stakeholders. You're not trying to, just make a mess of everything. So it is a little bit complicated because ego's involved. Insecurity is certainly a part of this. And I don't know if that really answered your question on like, how do we do that? That's just a method that I've been using to try to create a culture task force to really look at it.
And we are starting to get those questions coming in. So we'll get to those as well. So can you teach authenticity? I asked the questions in the poll. What signal do you most want your leadership to send? Confidence, compassion, vision, accountability, and authenticity. And 2/3 said authenticity. So how do you share that? How do you help people improve that?
Whoa, that could be its own talk. Oh boy, that's a really good question. I think that, well, so we just did this kind of experiment the other day. We're redesigning curriculum a little bit in the School of Business. They're doing it all over the country with the emergence of AI. We're just having to really think through some of these things. But one of the things we noticed when we surveyed the business community, the overwhelming response we got about what do our students need, it was this communication thing. It was this kind of showing up, being present, having authenticity, and we had no way of teaching that. Like, there was a real kind of back and forth in the School of Business. Like, is that our responsibility to teach these interpersonal skills? And I think it is. I really think that business schools are going to have to evolve and start to teach more of these emotional intelligence courses as it relates to business. Because I think if you want a competitive advantage as a business school, you'll start looking at your students with a little bit more nuance and mystery right there to think, how can we make them more competitive? The businesses seem to say, we'll almost train them up when they get here, but it's difficult to train that into them. If we could spend 4 years improving their emotional intelligence in the business school, I think that would be incredible. So your question about like, how do you kind of bake in authenticity? I think you have to have leaders that are authentic. I think you have to like start with kind of the leadership and make sure that whoever is customer facing, in our situation, it's students, you better make sure that the people you're putting out there in front of your students are authentic, right? If you're a salesman and you have a sales team, the leader of the sales team needs to be authentic. And if he's not, or if he or she or they are not coming across as that, I think that that's a wonderful way. I've been consulting for CEOs recently, and that's the number one thing I'm telling them is you can't, with AI, you can no longer say that's just not my leadership style. Like, AI allows you to provide yourself a roadmap for growth. And if you want to come across as more authentic, you can train your AI to help you get there. And so those excuses of like, not being present, not being available, reducing people, controlling, abusing, all the things that we're all kind of used to and are afraid of, I think that's going to start going away because of AI, in my opinion.
As a leader of leaders, you're talking about leaders. As the leader of leaders, what is an impactful way to make sure that they are getting what they need from me? How would you suggest positioning the conversation or the question so a leader can improve and position themselves correctly?
Are you saying, like, as a leader, when you go into an ecosystem, how do you make sure that what you're doing and signaling is actually accomplishing what you want?
That's the way I'm interpreting it. Yes.
Yeah. So empathy was one of the words that was an option earlier, right? Of something that we need to have. I always quote Atticus Finch at the first day of my classes, who, famously said, until you walk around in somebody else's shoes, you're really never going to know, what it's like being them. And you still can't know, but you can do the work of imagining, okay, if I'm a professor, do you remember what it was like being a student? Do you remember what you wished you'd had? Do you remember what would have made you feel like you were part of it, or that somebody wanted to mentor you? So like all of those questions, and as I develop new ones, I'm always asking myself, like, when I was 20, what would I have wanted this to be like? Right? So I have to go in there and signal in a certain way so that they know, oh, I can come in here and let my hair down a little bit. I can come in here. So like, I'm trying to do everything imaginable right now. One of the things for me is I had undiagnosed ADHD as a college student. And so taking notes was just almost impossible for me. And so now I just record my lectures and produce AI generated notes and sample test questions after every lecture so that they can just sit there and be present and listen. And I even encourage them to draw pictures and doodle. And so like, I think you just have to imagine, like, what would this have been like for me if it was an all-star experience, A+, and then reverse engineer it and go give the people, that famous give the people what they want. I mean, you have to do a little bit of self-reflection and some awareness to get out of your own head and lead with more courage instead of insecurity.
I like this next question, and I think I know what you're going to say about it. What age does one become a leader? Is it learned or built through life events?
This has been kind of debated, I think, in the literature even. Are salesmen born, or can you become one? Are leaders born, or can you become one? And I think, when it comes to human connection, I don't think there's any greater currency for a leader to possess, right? Like, you've seen athletes walk off a field and leave the coach out there by himself, right? There was no connection there. And I don't know. I really think that that's such a beautiful and nuanced question. Yeah, I want to think about that some more. That's really good. I don't know if I have something that I really want to spread around right there. Could you say that again? Honestly, I really want to try. I just want to hear that one more time.
What age does one
Yeah.
become a leader? Is it learned or built through life events?
You know, I will say this. I often operate where people say, what age can people get on social media? And I still don't have an age. There's nothing empirical that I can say about that. There's nothing empirical I can say about this. What I can say is this is where I think that parents can really play a role in their kids' lives. You know, I've told both of my kids, you know, we're trying to raise them with the emotional intelligence we think it takes to be a leader, somebody that, you know, when everything's going wrong and things feel chaotic, they're somebody that people go to because they're safe. And so I think that the earlier that safety gets into your kids, I think it starts right there. I think if you listen to what they're going through at school and then how they responded, and then your guidance and encouragement for other options, other ways that they can respond, you're developing that thing right there so that when they go into high school, college, their first job, they've just kept that same cadence and rhythm of being the safest person in the room. Because I heard somebody say that the other day, actually, that they don't know what type of environment they're going into at any given moment. They just want to make sure that if the room's not safe, that they're the only safe part in that room. They want to make sure that they're set up like that, because that's the only thing that you can control. And to me, that's where leadership starts. You can learn all of these skills about, you know, different things that CEOs know, or CFO, you know, like that's what we think of with real leadership, or different coaches, or like you can learn those skills, but it's not going to be sustainable unless people want to play for you, or unless, you know, students want to come to your class, or your people want to show up for you. So yeah, I think that as early as you can kind of instill those opportunities into your kids and guide them through that, I don't know if there's an age limit.
Any tip on how to work successfully, productively with a manager with poor communication skills, insecurity, and a big ego?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going to go back to developing that emotional intelligence, because most of the people in leadership, you know, they weren't seen or valued. They were dominated and controlled, and then they rode that train all the way to the, you know, wherever they are. I have found a lot of times just being vulnerable, you know, and there's a professional line there with a manager for sure. But going in and asking questions, really seeking to understand their philosophy and why they do what they do, and then being able to say at the end of that, I really appreciate you teaching me about, you know, kind of how you approach life and relationships and business. And I'd like to come back maybe sometime and ask a few questions. And I really want to learn about this company and our value proposition and where I fit into this. And I just appreciate your time. I would say that that's a first step of getting in there, is just showing them that you're curious about them. I think it signals awareness. I know in my life when people have done that to me, you know, like, or if I've seen other people do it, rarely is someone like, get out of here. You know, like, it's almost like a flattering posture. Sure. To suggest that you have something to learn and that you have the courage to come ask for it. You have this beginner's mindset. You don't know it all. Even if your boss is pretending like they know it all, you can lead by example right there, and show that you're just open and have a beginner's mindset and are always learning, and inject those ideas into your boss's mind. And, you know, if people weren't kind to your boss, there's a reason why they're not kind to you.
What happens when leadership norms are discounted and replaced by social media disinformation and mainstream focus on non-leadership traits?
To me, that question's really getting at the heart of our culture's dysfunction. We've certainly, you know, I've said this many times, but we know that people trust influencers, for example, as much as friends and family. And I don't think that's because influencers are, you know, super... I don't know if they have the communicative or connection skills that we would want to model for our children. I think that's more of an indictment on family itself. But yeah, social media at every level has so convoluted the genuine, the attempt to be authentic. It's just so hard to know. And I genuinely think that as much as we can to return to a more, our most human selves, especially with the rise of AI. I think the people who are going to be leading ultimately organizations, ecosystems, they will be the ones that became more human in this process. Because I think we can all tell with social media, for example, I don't know if the net has been positive. I think that many of us would see the problems we're having with kids, all the damning statistics that have come out of this. I really think that social media has done a number on our culture and our society. It's very difficult to agree on truth, on facts anymore. And so again, I think having this compassionate, curious posture within as many of us as we could possibly, that's why I'm giving this talk, is because I genuinely think one person at a time, I don't know how many people are on here, but I hope that everyone that's here is able to go give a version of this talk somewhere else, and that people can hear that, and somebody from that talk can, and I think it has to be organic, kind of a ground movement of little people of I consider myself, in that category, normal people that are doing courageous things. And that's the only thing that I can think of that can handle the answer to that question.
And I like that you brought up social media influencers. I had a poll and I didn't toss it up until you actually brought that up. And the question is, which cultural signal do you think most influences young people's view of leadership today? And the choices I gave were social media influencers, political figures, corporate CEOs, entertainment industry, and educators and mentors. And overwhelmingly, more than 75% of the audience right now is saying social media influence.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I think that political figures signal in terms of their impact. I think the signaling that political people do, because it affects everyone's lives, carries such a weight. Like I don't even know if we can imagine how big of a weight that carries. Having said that, yeah, these social media influencers, because they're trusted as much as friends and family, and most of them, the industry, this is where my research lies. Most of them are signaling, hustle culture, get rich, get powerful, build an empire. And if we have everyone in the world engaging in that type of philosophy, the world won't last very long. And so to me, that's kind of the proof in the pudding. If everyone were to behave this way, and they're also selling the exception, not the rule. An influencer, if you make it, you're part of the 0.001% of people that tried and made it, but they're selling it like it's possible for you. And it's super destructive and time consuming. People waste so much time being on social media right now. And this is a little sidebar, but the inflection point for all of the harmful statistics, suicide, eating disorders, you name it, you go through those harmful outcomes, those all explode at the 2-hour mark for our kids. And right now, the average in America for a kid on social media is 2.5 hours. So we're 30 minutes past the inflection point when all of those statistics kick in. And so, yeah, what those influencers are signaling with all of that is more damaging than we could imagine.
I like the phrase that's over your right shoulder. I don't know if people can see it. They're multitasking, they're eating, they're doing different things, but it says you're never too important to be kind or wrong.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to kind of the core of the talk too. I mean, that's a big part of this.
Yeah. That's actually my wife has put that up, and she's been the one that's honestly put all this in me. And I was having a conversation with my dad the other night, and I said, Dad, you taught me a lot of great things. One of the things I'm trying to get rid of, we have a decent relationship where we can talk about things, but so one of the things I'm trying to get rid of is when I think I'm right, for some reason, especially with my kids or my partner, I think that releases me from having to be kind. And it's subconscious. I think that a lot of us can fall into that. We become way more interested in converting or being right instead of just being interested in the other person and like where they are. And I don't know where that came from. I've been to other cultures and countries where that doesn't seem to be the guiding light. But I do think that's right, that sometimes we feel like we're so important that we don't have to be kind, that our importance or our influence gives us the privilege of not having to be nice or not having to be considerate. And I see our leaders at every level, politics, sports, business, that kind of are signaling that idea. I'm a big deal. Listen to me. And who's teaching them is my question.
Why is leadership today defined by herd mentality?
Oh my God. Yeah, great question. And I that goes outside of my my expertise. I think I could give a guess. I think people like to be part of something. I think that in terms of a herd mentality, whether it's your team, your sports team, your political team, we just like to feel like we're not alone and we're part of something. So when the herd starts going in a direction, especially as it pertains to leadership, I think it can be super easy to get sucked into that. And we often talk about a deontological ethic in my marketing classes where, you're just loyal and it's your duty and you don't really think about anything else. It's just, you're loyal to your herd. And until we learn how to critically think through some of that and feel like we can ask the question, am I okay if my herd turns on me? I just think that we have to ask some of those bigger questions and say, like, who am I if I don't agree with my herd? Do I even agree with my herd? Or am I just, part of that because it makes me feel safe? And is that actually real safety? So I think there's some, there's just some social configurations right there that are beyond my expertise. But if I had to say, it's something about belonging. And if you found a place where you feel like you belong, belonging will trump whether or not it's healthy.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap things up. What are your thoughts on defining future leaders based on analytics or defined educational tools?
I mean, as long as the analytics are built around human connection, to me, it's not like the method right there matters far less than kind of the input that gives you the output. So if you're working on AI and analytics to produce future leaders, it's like, yeah, that's a multivariate analysis right there. What are all the variables that are interacting to get you the outcomes you want? Because if the outcome is connection, who cares if they're a genius in systems, if they're, verbally abusing people, but they're getting the right outcome. So I just think that being able to open ourselves up to, so I'll say this, one of the things I've become so sure of is how hedonic we are. We're very short term. It's difficult for humans to think long term a lot. And I make this quote, I can't remember who said it now, but it's don't give up what you want most for what you want right now. And I see that just has permeated our culture. We give up what we want most all of the time for what we want right now. And then we wake up the next morning, we say, crap. That's a technical academic term, excuse me. But I just think that we have to really think about our lives, when we're 80 or 90, what are we looking back on? Who were we? What are people going to say about us? And what do you want? And that goes into manifestation culture. Like, if this is who you want to be remembered as when you're 90 years old, you have to work your way backwards. It's the same with health. If you want to be able to walk a mile when you're 90, are you in the shape that you should be in right now to even have a chance at that? And so that's how I would sort of conceptualize the answer to that question.
Final question. Any book recs to navigate this topic?
Oh, man.
I'm putting you on the spot. I know. Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm going to drop the Brene Brown really woke me up to leadership is in the title of one of her really famous books, and I've just lost it. If we can provide a link to everybody, I will find that. It's called Dare to Lead. Sorry. It popped into my head at the so Dare to Lead is one of the best examples of bringing, they kind of talk about this idea of armoring up. And so a lot of times leaders will go into a room and they'll armor up. And this book's kind of about taking that armor down and exposing yourself to critique and saying that you yourself are a lifelong learner and that you don't have it all together. And when you start doing that, people start having a little more confidence to throw ideas out there, to dream big dreams. And you want an ecosystem that's innovative like that. And so if you're all about power and control, you're not going to have a very innovative environment. With one exception, Steve Jobs was into power and control at Apple, and he slowly started getting rid of that. But that's the only time I've seen a company be born in innovation and the leader was a little tyrannical. And I love Steve Jobs. I love the way he finished his life, but there at the beginning, you just don't see innovative culture with a truly controlling and dominating leadership ecosystem. So anyway, that's how I'd answer that, Greg.
Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, Developing Brave Leaders and Courageous Cultures. I dropped that in the chat, the link to that for anybody that needs that. Parker, thanks so much for coming back and being here with us today.
Oh, of course. I loved it. Anytime.
And a quick reminder for today's audience, the webinar was recorded and we will send out a replay link when it is ready. Meanwhile, we'd love to hear or have you back for more upcoming webinars. Interested in franchising but don't know where to start? Join us August 19th for Pathways to Ownership, exploring franchising as a vehicle for wealth and legacy. On September 16th, our friends from the MPA board will be with us for public service and pop culture, learning about government and nonprofit from your favorite shows. Then come back for Thriving in Your 20s, Essential Healthy Habits for Young Adults on September 25th, as we welcome Dr. Aaron Snyder. And on October 7th, our ongoing partnership with the Klatt School of Business Career Center continues with Remote Control, Navigating Your Career from Anywhere. Register for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. And with football season just around the corner, join us on the rooftop of the Uptown Cantina for the best tailgate in town. We'll be there for every regular season home football game. Season passes are $125. Single games are $25 each. Join us for good food, live music, and a bird's eye view of Blazer Walk. Register at alumni.uab.edu/25 tailgates. And as we close, let us know how we're doing and ideas for future webinars. The QR code on your screen is going to take you to a very short survey for you to share your feedback. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.